Previously on Van Duel Theories, we embarked on a journey through an alternate timeline, one in which the Western Roman Empire never fell in the year 476 AD. Instead, it steadied itself with determined reforms, warded off collapse, and laid the groundwork for a new era. Join us now for part 2, where we'll see how this revitalized Rome sets its sights beyond the Mediterranean shores, forging alliances, waging wars, and reshaping civilizations far and wide. Get ready, because Rome's destiny is about to become the world's destiny.
And before we dive in, remember to subscribe to Van Duel Theories and smash that like button. We begin our second chapter in the decades following Rome's triumphant stand against internal corruption and external threats. The Western provinces have stabilized under strict but fair governance. A reformed tax system channels new revenues into the military, infrastructure, and scholarship. Rather than sliding into the so-called Dark Ages, our alternate West stands tall, ensuring roads are maintained, aqueducts rebuilt, and libraries expanded. Latin remains the common tongue of administration, while local dialects flourish in the background without threatening the empire's unity. The Senate, infused with fresh representation from various provinces, makes key decisions alongside the emperor, whose power, though supreme, is now tempered by advisory councils. Provincial assemblies further anchor the notion that this empire, once precariously close to imploding, has embraced inclusivity. In these ways, the seeds of an early form of participatory governance are sown. Yet the truly exciting developments lie beyond Rome's historic borders. In part 1, we saw how the empire's renewed backbone emboldened it to consider re-expanding. The roads are secure, the borders fortified, and the legions disciplined. No longer content with merely defending frontiers or repelling raids, Rome begins to dream again. This expansion is twofold: reclaiming lost territories, subduing or integrating the smaller kingdoms that had carved out independent niches during earlier crises. New ventures overseas, venturing beyond the usual theaters of warfare, North Africa, Britannia, and the edges of Germania, into even more distant lands. But territorial conquest isn't the empire's only goal. In this new political climate, conquest and alliance often go hand in hand. Rome's administrative machine has learned that raw force can be costly. Instead, the Senate forges economic and cultural ties, offering local elites a stake in the imperial system in exchange for stable governance and loyalty. The watchword of this new age is pragmatism, recognizing that the mightiest empire is one that wields not just swords, but also coinage, trade, and diplomacy. Historically, the 7th and 8th centuries saw the rapid expansion of Islamic caliphates across the Middle East and North Africa, forever shaping global civilization. In our timeline, a weakened Western Rome couldn't halt these movements, nor engage effectively in large-scale diplomacy. In this alternate world, however, a robust Roman state encounters the early Islamic realms with a mix of caution, curiosity, and respect. Diplomats and merchants travel across the Mediterranean and beyond, sharing goods, ideas, and sometimes shifting boundaries. Some regions see conflicts flare when frontiers move, or local populations chafe under new religious and political influences. Yet mutual admiration for learning also arises. From Damascus to Alexandria, scholars discuss mathematics, astronomy, and medicine with Roman counterparts. While tensions remain, both sides benefit from trade routes that connect the southern Mediterranean coast to the European interior. Within the imperial halls, debates rage. Should Rome open further trade missions and risk the spread of new creeds or close its gates? Ultimately, an expanding empire decides that commerce is worth the cultural risk. This fosters an atmosphere of guarded tolerance, reminiscent of how Christian authorities once coexisted with pagans. The 8th and 9th centuries thus witness a complex dance between Roman officials and the caliphates, a mix of skirmishes, alliances, and intellectual exchange. The Mediterranean, now more stable on both sides, becomes the heartbeat of global commerce, rather than a border-dividing chaos from civilization. Safe passage across the Sahara was historically treacherous, but the real Roman Empire had established minimal contact through North African provinces. In our alternate timeline, with the West firmly anchored in Carthage and reinforced by roads and strong naval linkages, deeper excursions south become feasible. Rome's appetite for resources, gold, spices, and exotic goods, drives explorers and merchants into sub-Saharan regions. Over generations, trade outposts bloom into settlements, protected by the imperial army. Berber tribes, once seen as peripheral, are brought into the network, forging alliances that grant them partial autonomy under Roman suzerainty. In return, they facilitate the empire's access to West African goldfields and other valuable commodities. Meanwhile, in the east, collaborative expeditions between Western and Eastern Roman officials set their sights on the Silk Road. Partnerships with Persian realms are often cordial, yet sometimes marked by tension. Regardless, the impetus to extend a unified Roman presence into Central Asia leads to caravans crossing mountainous passes, forging treaties with local rulers, and planting the seeds of cultural exchange. By the 9th century, the interplay of commerce, knowledge, and diplomacy fosters a global perspective once unimaginable in the west of our original timeline. In Part 1, we glimpsed how the continuity of Roman maritime tradition could spur an earlier age of exploration. Now, as the 9th and 10th centuries dawn, the Western Empire has not only secured the Mediterranean, but also established fortified ports along the Atlantic coastline of Gaul and Britannia. From these outposts, skilled shipbuilders refine advanced vessels capable of enduring turbulent ocean waters. Legends of lands beyond the Atlantic swirl in taverns and Senate hearings alike. Rumors from seafarers speak of distant islands rich in timber, fish, and unknown wonders. Emboldened by scientific curiosity, a hallmark of this revitalized empire, Rome funds exploratory fleets. The same spirit that spurred mechanical inventions like the refined Aeolipile steam engine now fuels maritime innovation, with navigational tools and star charts more precise than ever before. While not every expedition returns, the ones that do spark fierce enthusiasm. Ancient Rome, now armed with centuries of continuous governance and a taste for expansion, contemplates establishing permanent footholds wherever its ships might land. If these rumors of a vast new continent hold any truth, the entire future of humanity and the intercontinental balance of power stands on the brink of being rewritten many centuries earlier than in our familiar timeline. As expansion continues, Rome faces a profound challenge: integrating diverse cultures and faiths without fracturing from within. The policy of guarded tolerance introduced in Part 1 remains in place, but the arrival of new peoples and beliefs tests even the most well-intentioned administration. In the heart of the empire, Christianity has become the de facto state religion, though not with absolute dominance. Pagan festivals endure in some rural pockets, while newly acquired provinces bring in fresh customs, particularly in Africa and the Eastern realms. Christian leaders sometimes clash with local traditions, and the emperor, or empress if progressive inheritance laws come into effect, must continually mediate. This delicate balancing act is aided by the memory of near collapse. Unity is prized, and too severe a crackdown on religious practice might reignite old wounds. Within the church itself, the existence of a strong, unified Western Empire fosters theological discourse that might otherwise have fractured. Councils convene in Rome, Ravenna, and Milan, debating dogma, ethics, and the church's role in governance. Some bolder clerics even question geocentrism, drawing on newly translated works from scholars in the Islamic and Persian worlds. A synergy emerges, setting the stage for a potential scientific renaissance, fueled by the fusion of Roman statecraft and a Christian majority that, at its best, values knowledge and moral stewardship. The empire's stability and willingness to sponsor innovation had already borne fruit with early steam pumps and improved agricultural methods. By the 10th century in this timeline, that initial spark blooms into a quasi-industrial movement. Skilled artisans and scholars, supported by both wealthy patrons and the imperial treasury, experiment with new ways to harness mechanical power. Irrigation systems, no longer reliant solely on manual labor, spread throughout the territories. Mines across Spain, the Alps, and North Africa benefit from rudimentary steam-driven lifts and pumps. Urban centers begin to show the first glimmers of a mechanized era, centuries before the Industrial Revolution in our actual timeline. Imagine large estates that blend classical Roman architectural motifs with workshops humming under the influence of advanced water wheels or steam prototypes. Most citizens still live in an agrarian society, but Roman policy encourages local communities to adopt beneficial machinery, especially for essential tasks like milling grain, forging tools and constructing roads. This fosters higher productivity and a sense that the empire is perpetually marching forward. Naturally, resistance flares among traditionalists who favor simpler methods or fear economic disruption. Yet the pro-innovation coalition, senators, patricians, merchants, and generals eager to see the empire rise, keeps momentum strong. As with any sprawling empire, success brings its own set of complications. A widening wealth gap looms. Patrician families gain tremendous influence and riches from new trade routes and resource exploitation, while a burgeoning merchant class aspires to challenge their privileges. Ordinary citizens, farmers, craftsmen, and city dwellers sometimes struggle with rising prices and shifting labor demands as mechanization takes hold. Small protests erupt, especially in urban centers where factory-style workshops threaten traditional livelihoods. The Senate responds with protective laws, wage regulations, or tax breaks to quell discontent, mindful that widespread revolt could unravel decades of progress. Yet each policy stirs new debate about how to balance innovation with social equity. Regional identity also asserts itself. Provinces integrated centuries ago now boast multiple generations of Romans who still carry local traditions at heart. Iberians, Gauls, Britons, and North Africans each have a voice in the restructured imperial councils. And while they remain loyal to the empire, they clamor for greater autonomy. Because Rome's administration values provincial input, it negotiates expanded local authority carefully, hoping to avoid either unmanageable decentralization or harsh oppression that once drove provinces to rebel. By the dawn of the 11th century, this alternate Rome stands as a behemoth on the global stage, inextricably linked to distant societies through the twin forces of commerce and exploration. The Eastern Roman Empire, seated in Constantinople, remains a close partner, albeit with occasional political rivalries. Meanwhile, relationships with Islamic caliphates oscillate between productive trade pacts and sporadic military campaigns for territorial influence. Persia, India, and further east, powerful dynasties in China, all come into the Roman consciousness via ambassadors who bring exotic gifts and lay groundwork for transcontinental connections. While in our timeline, Europe was relatively fragmented, hence much slower to engage in extensive Asian diplomacy, this stabilized Roman presence shortens the timeline for East-West interaction. New ideas, technologies, and challenges travel faster along roads and sea routes that have remained well-patrolled for generations. Even more intriguingly, rumors persist of voyages across the Atlantic. If the empire establishes a solid foothold in the lands beyond that ocean, sourcing new goods, encountering indigenous populations, and forging entirely new trade circuits, the trajectory of world history could shift many centuries before Columbus's fateful crossing in our actual timeline. How does a civilization that once spanned the Mediterranean adapt to a realm potentially stretching across continents and seas? Part of the answer lies in a carefully nurtured imperial identity. Military inscriptions, coinage bearing the emperor's visage, and the ubiquitous presence of Latin, though evolving to include loanwords from numerous cultures, all reinforce the notion of one Rome. Even so, local pride and centuries-old customs color each province's participation. In some corners, elaborate festivals blend African drumming traditions with Roman theatrical performances. In others, Gaelic harvest rites merge seamlessly with Christian feasts. In politics, the emperor, supported by a robust Senate, must weigh all these regional desires against the overarching need for unity. This balancing act becomes the hallmark of the new age, an empire strong enough to extend its reach, yet wise enough to allow diverse voices to shape its path. In this second chapter, we've witnessed the reborn Roman Empire project its influence across continents, refine its technological arsenal, and grapple with internal dilemmas of class, faith, and expansion. From forging diplomatic ties with Islamic states to flirting with transoceanic exploration, Rome stands on the brink of an era so radically different from our historical Middle Ages that it's almost unrecognizable. Yet questions loom large. Will the empire's search for wealth and new lands inevitably overextend its resources? How will cultural interplay among Africa, the Near East, and far-flung provinces shape Roman policies at home? What happens if the empire truly discovers and colonizes the Americas centuries before any modern-era maritime power? And can all these diverse peoples, pagans, Christians, new converts from sub-Saharan Africa, or newly encountered Atlantic nations, coexist without eventually fracturing this vast tapestry of power? These mysteries await us in the coming installments. In Part 3, we'll delve deeper into the geopolitics of an empire stretching its tendrils in every direction, confronting new rivals, forging alliances with distant polities, and shaping global trade networks in ways our real timeline could only dream of. Thank you for joining us on this second leg of our journey through an alternate history where Rome never fell. If you've been enjoying this expedition as much as we have, make sure you're subscribed to Vanduul Theories. Tap that notification bell so you won't miss parts 3 and 4, where things get even more intriguing. Will Rome become a global hegemon? Will cultural and religious tensions ignite? Or will they spark a renaissance that catapults humanity centuries ahead of schedule? Stay tuned. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where do you think this mighty empire should focus next? Across the Atlantic, deeper into Africa, or forging an empire-wide peace with eastern states? Let's discuss it all right here. And remember, your likes, shares, and subscriptions help keep our channel going strong, allowing us to explore the biggest what-ifs that shape how we see our past and our future. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop exploring the boundaries of imagination. This is Vanduul Theories, signing off from Part 2 of our grand adventure. Get ready to expand your horizons in the episodes ahead.